Hello and welcome back to the Fabio Vieira or Jorginho YouTube channel. Yes, I've seen the comments, and no, I'm not going to spoil all of Mikel Arteta's tactical secrets in today's video. But what I am here to discuss is the transfer window, because it can be a scary place, inundated with why one player is better than another, or why one position is more important to address than another. But to the best of my ability, in today's video, I'm going to try and break down and clarify what Arsenal really need this summer. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. So if you like the sound of what's to come, then stick around and let's get on in with it, starting with an overview. And this video is going to try and present the different approaches that Mikel Arteta and Edu may take and why this summer. And it is key to stress that there is not a one-size-fits-all window. Arsenal are not looking for that one player on the market who perfectly fits a specific hole like Declan Rice did last summer. Instead, I'm actually relatively flexible on the who we sign, as long as these four squad needs that I'm going to go through now are addressed. First of all, it's about maintaining our progression of the football at the end of our current midfield cycle. It's also about improving our left-hand side dynamics. It's also about being better in moments, and when I say moments, I'm not necessarily looking for more goals, but it's those key moments and fine margins that come especially in transition that we should be looking on as a team to improve on. And then finally, in terms of filling squad holes, it's Rice and Saliba coverage. And this also, if we address this in the transfer market, increases our athletic and defensive edge. This is a mixture of strengthening the squad foundations whilst adding new details on top. And this is a balance that I've outlined in my more general transfer window video earlier on the channel. And I think with this list of qualities that we want to address as opposed to a set list of players, it allows us to be more open-minded to the market as it changes. And it helps get me and you on the same page as I go through the various avenues Arsenal's window could go down. So, without waffling anymore, the first option for Arsenal's summer transfer window is the marquee midfielder window. My personal favourites for this big superstar midfielder signing are on the screen now, but whoever the signing is, they have to be a top progressor of the football. The touch-heavy dominance and range of passing that we've had in the past with the Granit Xhaka has already left, of course. Thomas Partey's more specific qualities, which involve his verticality and his ability to eliminate a press through a disguised turn or clever shifts in momentum, look too like they're on the way out. And this comes on top of Jorginho's reduction in minutes and a possible Zinchenko sale too. Progression is something this squad must maintain. For how I envision the midfield going forwards, Rice will sooner or later move back into the number 6, leaving a gap in the left central midfield position, or the left 8, the left interior, meaning that the number 8 has to also be a very adept carrier of the ball between the lines inside a block often. And this is another facet, this between the lines play, that I want to add to our attack, but I think with one of our centre mids hopefully being added in the transfer window, the reintroduction of Timber and also Xhaka getting more central access on the right hand side, I think this is something that is mostly covered in-house. But this also raises the question, this new marquee midfield signing, or the potential of it, for Mikel Arteta's own vision of the midfield. Does he want to keep the current flexibility in our build-up I analysed in one of the videos that I'm most proud of, meaning that Odegaard and whoever the new left centre mid is continue our sort of pendulum system where one of the 8s drops at one time alongside the 6 and the other pivots higher? Or does he want to continue to evolve further, either fixing one of the centre mids in more of a rigid double pivot, allowing Odegaard, for example, to stay higher and roam on top? Or does Arteta want to flip these dynamics and have the left centre mid as more of a floater and box hitter, which would mean a completely different profile in the market entirely, but still a progressor of the ball, maybe just more focused on the carry and not as much from deep this time? And how, of course, do you go about incorporating giving Xhaka even more freedom within this structure? Does this mean Mikel wants to go full Real Madrid mode and max out our flexibility where everyone is sort of doing a little bit of everything that we seem to be increasingly getting towards, certainly at the end of this last season? These are very key questions that need to be answered. But one thing remains constant. Arsenal need to at least maintain their progressive qualities in the midfield next season. But the last requirement for this midfield signing is to be intense in their out-of-possession work. Look, I'm not asking them to be a Declan Rice, but they need to be athletic and willing defenders of space. One question remains though. If Jurrien Timber and whoever the left centre mid is next season enact that same fluid relationship that Tomiyasu and Declan Rice have done at the end of last season, the left-hand sided dynamics become probably about an 8 out of 10. But you still need to make sure you source an overlap on that left-hand side in order to maximise Martinelli in terms of getting him as closer to goal as possible. And here, Alphonso Davies is maybe a name, if you're going to look to source that overlap from the market, has been a name that's been growing and growing on me in the past weeks. This, of course, could also be an Alejandro Baldi or a Patrick Dorgu, and this flying, overlapping fullback is one of those extra details. I think Ben White is brilliant as a hybrid on the right-hand side, but adding a proper marauding fullback is a profile that the squad definitely does lack. I can talk about why Arteta doesn't really see Kieran Tierney in this position in the comments if you want to. But let's talk now. Alphonso Davies, he can hold the width on that left-hand side naturally, meaning that the left winger in this image, which is Jesus here, would be pushed into the left-hand sided half space where Emil Smith-Rowe is. So just imagine Jesus is Gabriel Martinelli. This would push Emil Smith-Rowe or the new left centre mid back outside of the block where they can be creative, of course. Now, this isn't a set triangle because Davies is more than comfortable in tucking into our 3 in midfield in our 2-3-5 in high possession and breaking blocks then through combinations or half-space crosses. And there are underlaps as well from Davies or whoever the fullback is and the left centre midfielder to give Martinelli more room to move into too. Meaning that this type of profile, this overlapping fullback, this dynamic option on the left-hand side does become a real option. I think if you're someone that wants to clone a Ben White for the left-hand side, that's when instead you look at someone like a Joel Hato. And I think there is a big now dilemma of Jurrien Timber, because for me he's good enough to play the majority of the minutes in this Arsenal team as a starter, but maybe you now have to find a new role for him, either like I've suggested in the past in midfield as our very own left centre mid, and this wouldn't actually alter the need to buy a real creative passer and progressor in the midfield, but it would mean we don't have to spend marquee money on this area. Or of course you move Timber to the right hand side, which raises its own questions, but there are still, if we buy a left centre mid and an overlapping left back like a Davies type, there are still specific squad holes to fill, in particular the William Saliba and Declan Rice ones. And the reason why I'm so big on Amadou Onana is because he fills both of them at once, whilst upgrading our duelling capacity in the middle of the park. Because if Rice was ever to get injured, we would lose a lot, especially in transition, and that's transitioning both ways. Onana has the legs to cover for Rice's absence, and although I think he would need to be properly coached to be disciplined enough as a lone 6, in the meantime you could play him in a double pivot if Rice was ever out, but I think Onana is at his best actually when he's moving into the pivot instead of being fixed. And this is what is exciting about Amadou Onana as a player. Not only is he so much better technically than I think he's given credit for example, he has a brilliant disguised pass through the lines, and I think what he lacks at times in deftness on the ball is made up in terms of ambition and bravery. But he does give us a depth across our entire build-up. Onana can definitely play in the left-hand side of number 8 for us, and this would just shift where we choose to spend our big bucks towards now the front line, while still maintaining the need to get a progressive midfielder alongside Onana too. But Onana can also fill Saliba's role, and it foreshadows a possible change in our system where we may be seeing a centre-back stepping through into midfield to make up the pivot like John Stones does for Manchester City. Again, this fixes any problems Onana may have of receiving the ball with his back to a press, and it focuses on what is arguably his best in-possession trait, and also the most important in-possession trait of an inverted centre-back, their carrying ability. But to complete this window, we are still looking for another extra detail, and it's those moments that I talked about in the introduction. For me, this doesn't necessarily actually mean we have to spend £100 million. For the wings, you could go for someone like a Nico Williams or a Pedro Neto or a Karim Adeyemi. That's probably in a list of priority for me. And then use them like Guardiola does a Doku. Or you can go for a projecty type of 9 in a Benjamin Sesko. These are the types of guys that you add to your attack to add that transitional threat via unstoppable carrying if you're talking about the wingers we've just named, or the channel running of a centre forward that strikes the fear factor into an opposition. I think all in all, this window, this potential window, is my personal favourite because it bulletproofs our foundations and our build-up dynamics whilst placing emphasis on in-house solutions to add that X factor to the Arsenal attack that Arteta and his staff, as revealed by The Athletic, certainly feel is missing from last season. And this could potentially be what Arteta is referring to in his interview here.
I think our focus has to be in basically with what we have already in-house, how can we be better? And there are margins and there are players that can still develop and be better.
He could be referring to the big space play of Fabio Vieira through his ball striking and creative range, or the carrying of an Emile Smith-Rowe. And I think Arsenal's window priorities may well depend on Arteta's assessment of these guys' long-term future and development, because I really want to maximise, and I said this in the last video, I want to maximise what Arsenal have at home before we look elsewhere. Otherwise it feels like a waste for me. But all in all, what I do draw the line at is I just want Arteta to be ruthless with his squad uses. If, for example, Smith-Rowe or Vieira, if he doesn't see a future with them, then you cash in. So, progression is a tenant for this transfer window. It's a requirement. But if Arsenal cannot offload Thomas Partey or another market opportunity arises, we may choose to place our marquee money on a different option. So option number 2 is a marquee attacker. Again, I'll lay out a similar template and reallocate funds and priorities accordingly. And for me, it's interesting, the discussion about a superstar attacker, right? Because I think there's actually more upside in Arsenal as a squad upgrading their left winger. But the most complete option on the market at the moment to truly elevate our attack is in the centre forward, and that's Victor Osimhen. Why is that? Well, like I said, he gives us that X factor. In particular, in transition, the way he is devastating in the channels, the way he drags and draws opposition defenders around, how he makes space or would make space for Martinelli, Kai Havertz to move into, or Xhaka and Odegaard to collect the second balls. And then inside the box as well, he's a dominant present. He can generate in static situations. He has the ability to make something his in the box. And this is a large part, I think, of what Arteta is investing in Kai Havertz to be in the centre forward. And a big question for Mikel and also for you guys at home is how much of an upside do you think there is between Osimhen and Havertz? And is the split and potential investment in an Osimhen worth that upside for you? Onana is still arguably a prerequisite for this window option for the same reasons, and we also still need a midfielder progressor. We would just look for a more cost-effective option like a Yusuf Fofana of Monaco, or a slightly more expensive 6'8 hybrid in a Mats Wiefer from Feyenoord. So our midfield next season could potentially, depending on what route we take, look something like this, with Rice as the starting number 6 and also providing depth in the number 8. Onana as depth in the number 6 and the number 8 with the potential to be a starting number 8. Then you have one of Wiefer, Fofana or the marquee left centre mid as the starting 8, depending on where you want your funds allocated. And then Jorginho is the 4th choice midfielder. Then again, you can tag onto this window a Davies type fullback or a projecty forward that we've named. But what would this superstar attacker approach actually mean for us next season? Well, we would definitely see the diamond in midfield with much more regularity, with Havertz, for example, playing off the back of an Osimhen type up front now. And also, I think more being used as a Swiss Army knife than a guaranteed starter. Timber would also play that fluid left-back role with a left centre mid much more, because Osimhen on his own is able to rotate with Martinelli on the left wing. And I mean, this fluid relationship with Timber and the left centre mid is something that I really, really like. And it's why a superstar attacker window, as long as we, like I've been saying all along, as long as we address all 4 of those key areas that I highlighted at the start, it's why you can go so many different ways this summer. But is there a curveball opportunity, I wonder, for Arsenal this window? And this brings me to option number 3. And I look here to the left-hand side, because for me, a Rashford or Rafael Leao look too difficult to secure in the current climate of the market. But what about a slightly more unfinished, yet superstar nonetheless, in Eberechi Eze? If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I do like my Eze propaganda, and he's the sort of player that you rip up your own plans and visions for the team that I have and reinvent them for. And especially when you find out that his release clause could be in the regions of 60 to 68 million pounds. I'm just going to give you 2 options for Eze next year if Arsenal ever decide to embark on a potential transfer for him, and that's dependent on whether he plays left wing or left interior. First, we're going to talk about Eze in the left interior. Of course, he's not as touch heavy as some of the names we've mentioned, but he would rotate with Timber in a very similar way to how Jurrien Timber did with Ethan Nwaneri. Timber often controlled play in the first and second phases from deep, and then he often rotated and switched with Nwaneri or Eberechi Eze in the final phase. And like Alphonso Davies, Eze's ball carrying can give us that moments player and transitional threat from a different area of the pitch. Eze would keep the left-hand side a progressive force, especially with someone like Timber behind or at least alongside him, whilst also maxing us out quite nicely between the lines, with again, Xhaka hopefully more central on the right-hand side. Eberechi Eze's relationship with someone like a Gabriel Martinelli is another really interesting dynamic, because Eze is a carrier as opposed to a runner in behind, meaning he still thrives off having outlets like Havertz and Martinelli around him. Eze could rotate naturally and hold the width and push Martinelli into that half space that we've been talking about, and is one of those associative players that Martinelli would strike up, I think, a really telepathic relationship with, like he already has with Fabio Vieira. Now, people will point to maybe out of possession fit for Eberechi Eze, but if you've watched the Englishman at all, you will know he is a natural duel winner, because the same way his body is built to attack with his long legs and his effortless strides across the pitch, he is built to win duels and be intense out of possession, and he's just a brilliant athlete on top of that. If he was to play left wing instead of a left interior, that would still be fine. Of course, you still need outlets around Eze because he's not really that in-behind threat. But it means that there's suddenly a really nice possibility of still procuring that rampaging left back for that left-hand side, and maybe having an Onana type in the left centre mid. And I think this sort of just sums up this video, because whatever plan Arsenal choose to go with this summer, and a lot more I think will be seen once the Euros have finished, it's about balance. And if we address those key themes that I set up at the start of the video, I can be relatively flexible, I think, in terms of the who is signed. So I hope this video can at least clarify what Arsenal need in this transfer window, and it can help you guys at least put into perspective all the different rumours and links, many of them probably very credible sources that we will gather in the next weeks and coming months, etc. But I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, really in-depth one on our transfer window stuff, and as more specific links come out, we will look at individual players more in depth, I'm sure. But that is a complete summary of what Arsenal are looking at and should be looking at and will be looking at in the transfer window this summer. Really hope you guys have enjoyed. Like, comment and subscribe. I only asked you at the end to do that. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.